Hi, welcome back to Future Paths. And once again, we have Professor Brian Kennedy. And for those of you who are here for the first time, you have missed the first part of our conversation with Professor Brian, wherein he shared his journey. And I'm sure you will appreciate it because from this conversation, we are going to go more into what he'll be busy with. So you will be able to connect it if you catch up the first part of our conversation. So please do go back and then catch up here with. And we'll jump right into the conversation. Professor Brian Kennedy, once again, thank you so much for
My
making
pleasure.
time to be here.
My
So,
pleasure.
I want to start with asking uh, how easy or difficult is it as a researcher and an administrator of a research institute? Uh, it's not a same hat, clearly. So, how do you balance your own research effort and also oversee?
Yeah, I'm really directing three different centers here in US and trying to do my own research, and also I'm involved with companies and stuff. So it really is a challenge to keep all of those things functioning. And for an academic center, our Healthy Longevity Translational Research Program has 30 some faculty in it. So yeah, that's a large number of people to deal with. All of those faculty are trying to get grants, secure resources to do their research, um, and publish high quality papers and really move the field forward and do high impact science. And I think my job is really to enable them. I don't think a program should be one person making decisions for 200 people. The best quality science is really done by bringing young people in with ideas and giving them the freedom and resources they need to pursue those ideas. So I see as running administrative centers, I see myself more as an enabler than a decision maker. But that takes a lot of time, and at the same time, I have my own lab with about 20 people in it that are all doing exciting science and trying to stay ahead of that and get my own lab funded. It's definitely a challenge at times.
So, does uh, work-life balance mean anything? I mean, do you agree to something like that? Because there are a lot of people who think that is, uh, I mean, people refuse to talk or even criticize this very terminology of work-life balance.
Yeah, I may not be the right person to advise on work-life balance because I'm not so good at it. I work a lot. Um, and but I have tried to do some things, as I've gotten older I try to keep myself healthy, which are trying to do a good job of managing stress. I mean, one of the challenges you have is that when you have the centers that big that you're dealing with, somebody's things aren't going right for someone all the time. And your job is to try to help them. But if you take that stress home and put it on you all the time, then you're constantly in that state of stress. And when I was CEO of the Buck Institute, that was a challenge. And I think that I've learned that you have to, give 100% toward helping people, but also be able to partition things so that when you go home you can live your own life and try to find your own enjoyment. So I also I try to make time for I do exercise. I'm a runner. I do a lot of reading. I occasionally get on the golf course. So I do my best to balance it, but I definitely work a lot.
Right. Uh, what do you find it more challenging in terms of your work? Is it finding the right kind of talent, or is it about raising right amount of money, grants and support, or is it time itself to focus on the research that you want to pursue?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges for me is that you have a to-do list that never goes to zero. And I'm still trying to be a scientist too. And to have creative ideas, you need time to think. You need to be like dissociate yourself from all those things you have to do and just read some papers and think about the research and come up with ideas. And I think that if you're not careful, that's the time that really gets sacrificed because all the other things have deadlines and you're trying to meet those deadlines, and you tend not to spend enough time just thinking, which is sort of what I got hired for in the first place. So that's a big challenge. And of course, it's always about resources. The getting biomedical research costs money, and whether you're doing it in a university or whether you're doing it with a company, you have to raise the resources to get the research done. And it's always challenging. You have moments where you bring in big grants and you have a chance to breathe a little bit, but before you know it, that money's running out and you're trying to get more money. So I think that I certainly spend a lot of time writing grants and trying to raise money. And I think also that the way you raise money in science has changed a lot. A lot of money comes philanthropically now. And that's great. I'm glad that people want to give money to science. But raising philanthropy is different from writing grants that a grant review panel in the government would evaluate. And so then there's also contract sponsored research with companies. So things have gotten a lot more complicated. There are more avenues to raise resources, but things cost a lot more money to do as well. So that's always a challenge.
So, so by what you say, getting people is the least of the problem compared to finding your own time and uh, the money for the effort.
Yeah, I think that recruiting people is also difficult.
But
Singapore's a,
relatively speaking, it is the least of your problem considering
yeah,
the
I've been
other.
lucky to get really good people in my lab over the years, and you're only as good as the people doing the science. And so I've been lucky to get some really good scientists, and I think being
No,
at NUS is an advantage.
no, but what's your take? Because most places, including US and Europe and even in India, globally, people have started talking about it, even Japan, that the younger people have less interest in science or STEM
Yeah.
subjects. So, I mean, pretty much all parts of geography, people are talking about it. What's your take on that?
I think that's probably somewhat true. Particularly, I've seen that in the U.S. There's less people that are raised in the U.S. that are seem to want to go into scientific careers, and I think that part of that is because the stress on the professors has got higher. The challenge of raising money, the barriers they have to get over, the amount of stress you see your PI under is you look at that and you say, I'm not sure I want to do that. I think I've been able to get around that a little bit because I really recruit globally. I really don't care where people come from. I'm looking for people that are smart and excited, and so I have over the years people in my lab from I don't know dozens of countries, and so I'm more open to that. I'm not looking for just people from a certain type of university, or I think that some of that's overrated. What you a lot of people have the ability to do great science if you enable them, and if you bring them in and you look for those people that are driven and have creative ideas, then most of them will do well if you believe in them.
Well, that's an interesting thing you mentioned because recently, last year in 2023, India had a successful attempt at Chandrayaan, the campaign to a space effort to map
Yeah,
moon, and there was a campaign to go to Mars, and then a project to study sun and all these things. And
yeah,
Indian Space Agency is called ISRO, and there were a lot of media, particularly in India, a lot of talk was happening about all the scientists who work there. They come from tier two, tier three schools, engineering places, and not the leading institutions, scientific institutions in India. Uh, Whereas all the leading institutions are very good at producing very good professionals who either leave the country or work for large corporates. And
yeah,
so that there was a lot of debate about it. So is
yeah.
it
I think
something close to what you say?
yeah, a little bit. I think certain fields, the draw to go away from academics is strong. Like bioinformatics, it's almost impossible to pay people at a university level what they can demand working for companies, and so that's an area where it's a challenge. I actually think that I've been lucky. I have a PhD from MIT. My undergraduate is from Northwestern University, which is a great school. Did a postdoc at Harvard Medical School. But I also think that there's a little bit of ego there. That sure they're great schools, but I think you can get a great education at a lot of schools if you're motivated and driven. And so I don't really care where people come from. And I think that some of the best scientists they also mature a little bit later, so they may not have the grades when they're in high school to get into these top schools, and they may have to come up through different kinds of schools. But their desire to succeed and their ability matures a little bit later, and then they become great scientists. So, honestly, I don't care where people come from. So,
Well, that could be a lot motivating for a lot of people. So, uh, do you want to give a shout out to any specific resources that you're looking at, perhaps through this future path?
yeah, I'm sorry. Any specific? I didn't hear it.
I mean, you to call shout out to for any resources that you want to, if they should reach out to you for any of your projects or efforts.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if you're in the biomedical field, you're interested in longevity, either in the academic sector or the private sector, we're always looking for people that will help. It's There are a lot of applicants, of course, but we're very open-minded, so feel free to reach out to us.
The work that you're doing, what are the things you see as a challenge going forward? Uh, Apart from the resources that we talked about, but uh, how do you see? Because there are also a lot of places now. We've had opportunity to talk to some of the research scientists and professionals in the longevity space from different parts of the world. So, where do you think some great work is happening? Which part of the world do you think is some good work is happening?
Well, I think the great thing about longevity research is it's becoming global. I mean, this was highly driven by the US for decades because the National Institute of Health formed one of their institutes is the National Institute of Aging. And that put a large amount of money aside to fund basic biology to understand the aging process. And that started in the 70s. And so most of the money was available in the US at the time. But what we've seen is that's really become globalized as the demography of the world is changing and there are more and more older people. And now you're seeing China put lots of money in, Singapore's put money in, Korea, Japan, so Asia is really starting to pick up the pace on longevity research. I think India is starting to really grow now. I get more and more interactions with India, with people wanting to start longevity clinics or do research in the space. So that's another potential really strong research country once they put the resources into it because there's so many smart people there that want to do science. Um, and then, Europe has grown, and I was very fortunate to help this Gero Center in Santiago, Chile, get funding from the government for a 10-year program in longevity research. And so you're beginning to see South America take off as well. It's really exciting right now. And in fact, there's so much interest in the longevity field that I could just not have it at home anymore. I could travel from one site to the next and go to conferences and advisory panels. And I like doing that because it's a way to really support the growth of the science in the field.
And uh, all the people working in longevity are very openly collaborating. Is that how the ecosystem is?
That's how you'd like to have it. But that's never completely true. But I do feel that right now, when I started in the field, there was a lot of disagreement and there wasn't much money. And so there was a lot of motivation to keep your results secret. And now I think it has gotten a lot better. I think the field is pretty aligned on the idea of extending human health span. I think there's most people in the field believe that's going to be possible in the near future. And I do feel like that a lot of groups are working with each other to collaborate. One of the things I do is when I go give a talk, I usually share the data that is on the last page of the notebook if I can. I mean, there's sometimes cases where you might have to file a patent or something. You can't do that. But if it's at all possible, I want to share data because the goal is to accelerate discovery in the field. Um, and I'm not averse to making money. I don't think anybody in the field really is either. But the more important thing is that we work together because this is such a big challenge that it's going to take a lot of different kinds of thinking to solve that challenge. And the more we can work together, the faster we'll go. And I think that a lot of people in the field have embraced that concept.
What's your take on companies like Neuralink, which are, inserting chip to, which is again talking about healthy longevity, right? They're not talking about longevity per se, but uh,
Yeah.
healthy longevity in the sense whatever is the lifespan, but being healthy and having an active head, mind, and even facilitating a lot of functionality otherwise is weakened and such. So, how do you see such an effort contributing to your kind of longevity as a whole?
Well, I think it's exciting. The device space is more recently entered the longevity field, and most of that is in diagnostics. So you have your Aura Ring. I don't know if you can see it. You have Garmin watches. I try all of these things out, and they're interesting because they monitor how your body's functioning, and they give you feedback directly on it. Another one is these glucose monitors that measure how your body's reacting to what you eat. I think those have been extremely valuable for the field for a couple reasons. One is from a research perspective, it allows you to collect a lot of data on
Data,
people that
right?
you're trying to measure aging. But also, I think it's extremely valuable for the people that are wearing them. I noticed that people that use these sort of diagnostics are um, asking interesting questions. Like, well, I'll give you an example. The people that wear the glucose monitor, they go exercise and they're going for a run and their glucose goes up, not down. And then they're like, well, wait, I'm depleting energy. Why is my glucose going up and not down? And when they start asking those questions, they're learning about their physiology, which can only help them, I think, in terms of a healthy lifestyle. So that's great. So that sector has sort of emerged already. But now you have other things coming along that are really trying to modify how our body functions.
Right.
And it's still early days, but I think it's certainly very promising there too. I'm very open-minded to different kinds of interventional strategies to keep people healthy. And so I don't, not one of these people that worries overly about, what's going to happen. I think that we need to pursue technology. I don't think there's any time in the past where we would have said, "Oh, let's stop." And if we did, we would have been better off. I mean, it's true that technology is neutral and it's how you use it that matters. But I think that I don't want to give up my cell phone, and I don't think
Right.
that in 20 years the medical advances that we'll have, people are going to want to give up either.
What about biohacking? In fact, there are a lot of people who are trying it at home, making YouTube videos and things like that. Some of them
Yeah.
are scary, but how do you bring into a organized research effort? Because somewhere I think they are also required, but not in the way it is done. What's your thinking?
Yeah, I interact with a lot of people doing biohacking, and the first thing I'll say about this is that I think people should have the right to make as many of their health decisions as they can. I think that one of the challenges is that um, it's not the fault of doctors. The doctors are trying to do the best they can, but they have a very small amount of time with each individual when they see them, and so they just tell people what to do and instead of having the time to like educate the person and let them make their own choices. And I think when it comes to long-term health, the more of your own choices you can make, the better. So I'm supportive of what these biohackers are trying to do. I think that's fine. I do worry about the message they send sometimes though, and because they tend to make assumptions that either are not true or haven't been tested yet. And I'll give you an example of one of them. Um, if you have three interventions, A, B, and C, and all of them, at least in animal models, seem to keep you healthy longer, that doesn't mean that if you add A, B, and C together, you're going to get some synergistic or beneficial effect. And we've done a lot of combination testing in mice. And what we find is a lot of times two things will cancel each other out or have adverse effects together. And so, I tell people if they want to try some of
So
these
it's not a
supplements on the
simple
market,
arithmetic everywhere.
I tell people if they want to try some of these supplements on the market, pick one or maybe two things to try, but don't take 20 different things because I don't think anyone has any idea what that's doing to a person. And also, I think sometimes the messaging is bad because it gets back to this concept we talked about earlier, which that it's about billionaires. Somebody gets online and says, I'm spending $2 million a year for longevity.
Right.
Well, that's their right. That's fine. But I want to leave everyone with the notion that we're trying to develop strategies that are not going to cost that much, that most people can afford and enjoy the benefits of.
Well, what are the challenges that you see for your own research efforts going forward in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years?
Now, I think the biggest challenge right now in the field is one that's been there for a long time, and that's that the regulatory agencies don't see aging as a disease. It's slowly changing. There are new ICD codes that say age-related disease, and it's moving in that direction. But the fact that aging is not a disease means that if you have a drug, it's very hard. You can't get it approved to treat aging and get reimbursed for that. And so most of the companies that are developing drugs to slow aging are picking a disease and then trying to treat a disease instead of just trying to target aging directly in the clinical studies. And I think that's a big challenge because it's really kept money out of the field. It's kept the pharmaceutical industry out of the field because the slowing aging doesn't fit their reimbursement strategy typically. So we need to generate the human data that says we can slow aging, and that some of that may have to happen academically, where you can get grant money to do it, validate that we can actually do it, and then get that regulation changed because it's certainly an impediment moving forward right now. I think one thing can I add too is that it's also an issue with mindset. I mean, most clinicians don't know that much about aging. And it's not their fault. Medical school, the curriculum has almost nothing about aging in the whole medical curriculum, typically,
Okay. Mhm.
which is, again, going back to an earlier point, really odd because it's the one thing that happens to everybody, and they don't teach it in medical school. And so, clinicians don't have an up-to-date knowledge of what's possible. So when you're trying to, make more widespread use of these longevity interventions, uh, they're not always an ally moving forward. And so you end up having to educate clinicians and government people and regulators, and we need a better understanding globally of what healthy longevity means and why it's valuable.
So, what do you think should be done? I mean, should that be your responsibility as a research scientist that you should be working on this, or do you see uh, who should be working on it? Because unless this is addressed, right, compliance, policies, and also education. So these are fundamental to all the efforts.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, certainly, I think it is incumbent on researchers and professors and even people in private sector to get this message out and help educate people. I don't know that they're the ones that have the most time, or maybe even the best at it sometimes. But it's important that we don't just hang out in our, ivory
Well,
towers or
unfortunately,
communicate in the
Professor
world.
Bryant, in the first part of the conversation, you mentioned that, we try to bring more youngsters into it. See, there has always
Yeah,
been this thought about young. See, in India also, our government, our prime minister, who's 73, I think, 73, 74, 72, 73, something around that. And he talks about we need to bring more youngsters, and our parliament is becoming young in India. It's
yeah,
become around 57, average age 55, 56, something like
yeah,
that. It used to be much higher, and now it's become
yeah.
younger. And somewhere it is good because India has more. 50% of India's population is below 35, so which is significant. So it sounds very logical, but at the same time, if we look at the data, nearly 210 or 20 million people are above 65, which is a huge number. I mean, if you look at it, it's more than few countries in Europe put together.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know it's a
So,
big
how do
challenge, and
we draw this young and aging and into the same mix?
yeah, it's a challenge, and I think it's also an opportunity. By the way, if you have a lot of old people that are sick and they need caregivers and they're not actively functioning in society, that costs a lot of money, and it drives the healthcare costs through the roof. But if those people are still healthy and active and engaged, it's actually an economic benefit. And I think that I would start by saying that there's too much ageism going on in the world right now. In certain countries, even in Singapore, there are retirement ages, and it's kind of hard to keep working. I think that you can put a barrier on functionality when you get to a certain age. Like if you're a professor and you get to 65 and somebody says, all right, let's see how much they're actively producing research and how well they're teaching. But if they meet that bar, we shouldn't be ageist about it and trying to force them out of the workforce. The worst thing you can do to a person is say, go retire, go home, sit on the couch and watch TV. And we should be having re-education programs, retraining, keep people in the workforce, keep them volunteering. Uh, People are living a lot longer now. When retirement age was introduced, the average lifespan in the US was 63. So, it wasn't a plan for you to go spend 30 years watching TV. It was a plan to go home and die if you made it that far. So I think that I don't want to go back to that. I think that people do deserve the freedom as they get older to enjoy their lives, but we should also be making it possible to enable them, to empower them, and to encourage them to work. But you're right, we have to integrate that with the younger generation. And one of the things that I'm excited about is there's so many young people interested in the longevity field right now, and not just scientists. We have a healthy longevity talent incubator here at NUS that's a 2-week course in the summer. It's small right now, but we're going to try to grow that. And the people that come to that have all kinds of different expertise. Not all of them want to be scientists. Some of them want to be educators. Some of them want to be influencers and get into governments and make changes and innovate. And so I think that right now the longevity field is really drawing in a lot of young people, and hopefully that'll continue because we need the young people. You're right. At the same time, I think we do want to balance it. We don't want to like kick out the old people either. So I mean that kind of defeats the point of healthy longevity. So it is a challenge.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and we'll bring Professor Brian once again to talk about his perspective on future, and also hopefully get some predictions from him. And hope you liked and enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. So please feel free to go ahead and share this with all those who you think will appreciate it. And if you're not yet subscribed to Future Fast, do it right now. And till we meet again, enjoy the ride. Professor Brian, thank you so much once again for
Thanks a
doing
lot.
this.